So I did want to chime in on the Michigan-Texas thing, maybe help out David a little bit I'm a big returning production guy, and Michigan is going to be in the 120s of that, Texas top 25. Also, coaching-wise, I think Steve Sarkisian at this point is a more seasoned and better coach than Sharon Moore. Quinn Ewers will be the far better quarterback in that game. I don't think that's a discussion. I do agree with you. Their defense is going to be very good, but do I think Alex Orji's going to score 3 touchdowns versus us? Because that's what I think at minimum you're going to have to score. I don't. So I don't think they're winning that game. I would bet on the under personally. I think they're 9-3, which I don't know why that's such a hateful thing to say. You're losing a lot off of probably, in my opinion, the 3rd or 4th best team of the last 15 years. So I don't know why that's hateful to Michigan fans, but whatever. There are a couple over and unders I did see that struck me, and I don't know what you thought about. Texas A&M at 8.5 seems wildly high for a first-year head coach in a terrible situation.
Yes, we'll check out their schedule. 8.5. Now the payout is plus 114 for the over and minus 142 for the under. So the thing with these win totals is Vegas is very much encouraging a play in one direction, and for Texas A&M, they are highly encouraging people to bite on the over because they get paid out much more money on the over. Now let's check out the schedule. I know they've got Notre Dame at home.
Yeah, and then obviously they have us to finish the season, which will be fun, will be interesting. But it just, I mean, I've seen coaches with more of a track record go into, I think, the same situation or a better situation and struggle way worse than, 9 wins would be crazy. If Elko gets 9 wins in the first year, he should be coach of the year, period. He's lost. He should be.
I'm not ready to say that, not knowing what other coaches,
if Steve Sarkisian went undefeated and won the national championship, I would still go Mike Elko with that roster. He was bringing in a whole new team in a terrible situation.
If there's another David Braun out there that takes Northwestern to go 8-5, then I'm on board with that.
So right there in their first 4, I think they're 3-1. I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
They're not beating Missouri. I don't care where that's played at. They're not beating Missouri. They'll beat Mississippi State, in my opinion. So what is that, 5-2 at this point? That's my opinion on that. I don't know if you have anything to comment on
at that point. Well, see, I'm not so brash to just say that's a win, that's a loss, that's a win, that's a loss. We're sitting here in February.
No, I agree, but I'm just running like simulations basically in my head. If they played 100 times, Missouri'd win that game 75% of the time.
Because again, I'm going to bring this up one more time for people because I can say this over and over and over, but to execute it and figure out who these teams are is a whole other matter. When you've got 25 teams in the Power 5 out of 69 that have a win-loss increase or decrease of 3, and you go try to of at least 3, and then you go try to find those teams, then you look like an idiot, or you're just trying to make these crazy predictions if you go to each conference and try to find a third of the conference, more than a third of the conference, that's going to have an increase or decrease of that many wins.
That's fair. I mean,
where are those teams? If you see most people that throw out predictions, and the reason I started tracking this, because I started looking at these preseason magazines and I started just noticing that all they do is pretty much predict what happened last year. They just changed the records by like one game. And unless there's like an obvious situation like Colorado was easy to see, they're not going to go 1-11 again. But besides those kind of situations, Athlon, Street and Smiths, all these publications, I'm looking at them and they've got basically they're repeating the records from the year before and changing them by one game, maybe, except for like 3 teams that are obvious trends in one direction. And then I decided I'm going to start looking at every season and figure out, okay, 3 wins is significant. How much of a change is there from year to year? And it's like 25 teams a year.
Yeah. No, I mean, if Texas A&M went 5-7 last year, correct? Did they go 5-7 or 6-6?
7-5.
Oh, they went 7-5. Okay, yeah. So 3 wins. I mean, I don't know if you were betting,
Yeah.
but I would pick them to win 4 games more than I would pick them to win 10. I'm not going to pick them
Yes.
to win 10 games.
Yes.
Just based off their schedule. I think they could go 8-4. Like, I think that's personally reasonable. Like I said, I didn't know their schedule before making that point. And their first 4 games, other than Notre Dame, I mean, Florida is going to be, I don't even know. I think they might be the second or third worst team in the SEC next year, just based off their schedule as well. And then Billy Napier, I don't know what he's doing. But, I mean, right now I see 5-2. I think they'll lose to Missouri and Notre Dame through
So
this schedule.
chat, take whatever conference you want, any conference, and select a third of those teams minimum. You should actually select one higher than that and choose a third of the teams, like in the Big Ten, 18 teams. Select 6 in the SEC, 16 teams. Take 6 and find 6 teams and put them in the chat that you believe are going to either win at least 3 more or lose at least 3 more next season, and see how difficult that is.
I'm going to look at the standings just because now I'm interested.
So, for example, everyone, last year in the Big Ten, it was 5 out of 14. Minnesota went from 8-4 to 5-7. Illinois went from 8-4 to 5-7. Purdue went from 8-4 to 4-8. Iowa went from 7-5 to 10-2. And who am I missing?
Are you counting regular season and their bowl game if they had one, or just regular season?
No, it's just we don't know who they're going to play in a bowl game. It's just a regular season exercise. Yes, just those 12 games. Oh, Northwestern 1-11 to 7-5. So Mike Fort says Kentucky could lose 3 more. LSU could lose 3 more. So Kentucky went 7-5 last year. Kentucky's going to go 4-8, according to Mike. And I'm not saying Mike's predicting this, but he's just throwing 2 teams out. LSU would have to go 6-6.
Yeah, I don't see that.
And you still have to find another 4 teams to do that. But it happens every year.
I was gonna say we can keep going through this if you want, but Auburn too. Auburn, they went 6-6 last year. I think they can win 9 games. And then let's click on those Sooners, Mark, because they're at 7.5, and I know their fans. You have a guy on here, nice guy, respect him. I don't think it's a guy I spoke to when we do your shows, but he has his own channel. He posted a video. I tried to watch it, and then it just felt like trolling to me. He said why Oklahoma is set up better going to the SEC than Texas. And I think Oklahoma fans would even laugh at that because there's no chance you're replacing your quarterback, your offensive coordinator, your whole offensive line, and coming back with a god-awful defense, and you're going to be better than us. I would bet every single penny I make for the rest of my life, Oklahoma does not win more games than Texas next year. There's no chance.
You would bet every penny that you're going to make the rest of your life. Well, I'm not saying you're wrong because I tend to believe that you're correct, but I certainly wouldn't make that bet myself. I wouldn't make that bet for Ohio State against Rutgers.
That's fair. I just don't
never know what could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if half our team dies and Austin gets taken over, I don't know. Maybe if that happens, then yeah. But unless Jackson Arnold comes in and he is Trevor Lawrence, it's not happening.
All right, Matthew. So they've got to win the first 3 games.
And they're at home. They should. Man, they start out four games in a row at home.
Yes. So Tennessee, that's going to be a good barometer right out of the gate, or not out of the gate, but knowing Oklahoma and how they've struggled against, let's see, last season it was BYU, UCF. I wouldn't necessarily call this Tulane game a complete check mark.
Is Michael Pratt back, or did he declare for the draft?
That is a great question, because that's the same question that was running through my mind when I said that.
Yeah, I know it was a big deal, and then it went there. I haven't heard anything about it. I think he might have declared. I think I may have seen him on a draft, like mock draft thing, but I don't know.
I see 3 days ago, 2024 NFL Draft Quarterback Deep Dive, Michael Pratt.
Okay.
So
he's gone.
It looks as though that's the case.
Yeah, that makes a pretty big difference because I don't even know who their quarterback is at that point. But yeah, I mean they lost to Kansas as well with without Jalen Daniels. So um and Kansas was still good last year without Jalen Daniels, but their Jalen Daniels is a whole different thing than Jason Bean. But I think that's a 50-50 game versus Tennessee. I think
Yeah.
Tennessee is one of those teams, if Nico can come in and play 80% of what Hendon Hooker was 2 years ago, they can be a really, really good team. But I don't know if he can do that. We'll see.
So would we agree that most likely they're 4-1 going to
Yeah,
the
into the
Cotton Bowl?
bye. I would agree with that.
Most likely. 4-2.
South Carolina, I think they win that game. At Ole Miss, I don't think they win that.
So they're at 5-3, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't even know Maine had a football team, but they play Maine.
Heck yeah, the Black Bears. So they've got Maine at 6-3.
Wow, that's a rough 3-game stretch in a season.
Yeah. Wow, it really is. Missouri on the road, Alabama at home, at LSU. Ooh.
So what did we have them at, Mark?
They were at 6-3 before those three.
So at best, they win 2 of those games, in my opinion. They're not winning all 3.
Yeah,
There's no chance.
yes, at the very best.
So they're
They
8-4.
the probability is that they lose 2 of those 3.
Yeah, I was being kind. That's why I'm saying like 7.5 is perfect to me. I mean Vegas knows what they're doing. They're
Yeah.
going to win 7-8 games.
Yeah.
I was looking through the schedule. I hadn't seen the whole thing yet, and I knew they played Alabama, but I didn't know they were getting those 3 to end the season. That makes a big difference.
Well, Matthew, regardless of where you want to go next, can we cut in with Texas?
Yo, of course we can.
So
I've already predicted this in advance. I'm going to update it probably every month, just to get because things change so quickly. Like something could happen and that could flip. So we'll see. But we'll go through it. But I know what the record is right now that I predicted.
yeah, and just of course let me know the most likely pitfalls.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're not losing to Colorado State. I'm not saying Michigan's a win. I'm not. Do I think we're going to win that game? Yes. We're favored. I think we should be favored. I think we have the better team. But Michigan is definitely, they're going to be a top 15 team next year. They can beat us, but I do think we win that game. I mean, the next 3, we'll win those games. So we're 5-0 going into the bye. And then Oklahoma, obviously, everyone knows that's usually a toss-up game. I believe his name's Jason, when we were talking about the Cotton Bowl last year, mentioned first-year starters do very bad in that game. Like, they'd only won 3 or 4 of the last 20. So Jackson Arnold going into that game, it's his first start.
Yep.
I don't think they're winning that game. This is a loss. We're not beating Georgia. I don't care if it's played in the Walmart parking lot. I don't care if it's played on the moon. I don't care if it's played on Mars. We're not beating them. So
you were conceding that game at home?
Yes, because I think Georgia next year is going to be I don't know, a chainsaw mixed with a barbed wire baseball bat and kill everyone.
You're giving them the national championship.
I think the national championship will be one of those 2 teams on that field next year, Ohio State. I would bet those 3 are the field. I would take those 3.
Okay.
All
right. So that's 1 loss against however many wins at that point.
Yeah, at Vanderbilt, we'll win that game. I'm going to try to go to that game because that's the closest Texas really gets to here from Ohio. And then Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, A&M. We're going to lose one of those games, in my opinion. I don't know which one. I went out on a limb. I know it's at home. I think Kentucky's going to be pretty good next year. I think Brock Vandagriff is going to show people that he's a pretty good quarterback. All the other transfers that they got. I think Mark Stoops is an underrated coach in the SEC. I did my SEC coach rankings. I think I had him 7th. So I think we're going to lose to them. If not them, I can't believe I'm going to say this. A&M would be the second out of those 4 would be second to me that we could lose to. We're not losing to I'm telling you this right now. Mark, you remember it was my first year on this channel when Arkansas skull dragged Texas.
Sure.
That's one of those games on the schedule. Texas is going to destroy Arkansas and Fayetteville, destroy them. Sam Pittman will be fired by that point, and they are going to remember that Arkansas ran for 300 yards in Steve Sarkisian's first big game. We're going to kill them. that there's like 2 guarantees to me on the schedule, and Arkansas is one of them in like real games. I'm not going to count playing UL Monroe. But Arkansas to me will win that game. Florida, I mean, that's crazy too when you look at this. We play Florida and Arkansas back to back. They will probably have interim head coaches by the time we play both those teams. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think if we're going to lose, it's going to be to Kentucky or Texas A&M. I think we're 10-2.
And it's a 10.5.
Yeah, I'd bet the under. I don't see.
Hmm.
I did talk about this yesterday, and I talked about the last 10 national champions and what it takes to become that. I brought up blue chip ratio. I brought the average into it. You have to have an average of a 69.7% blue chip ratio. We have that. Then I brought up quarterback. You have to have an NFL quarterback. Mark, out of the last 10 national championships, only one team hasn't had an NFL quarterback, Jake Coker, Alabama. I talked about average offense, average defense. The average offense is there, but you have to be top 10 averagely in both. I think Texas will have a top 10 offense. I think Quinn Ewers is going to be an NFL quarterback. But then there's also that delineation between an NFL quarterback and a first round NFL quarterback.
Sure.
And you saw teams like LSU's defense really wasn't that good. They were actually the worst out of the last 10 champions. But guess who they had at quarterback? They had Joe Burrow. So I said, if Texas wants to win a national championship this year, and people can laugh at me, the game or the blueprint is 2019 LSU. Quinn Ewers is going to have a Joe Burrow season next year. He won't have to be that good, but he has to have 90% of those stats for Texas to win a national championship.
Did you just count Cardell Jones as an NFL quarterback?
I believe he got drafted.
He got drafted, I believe, by the Chargers.
Yeah,
that's if he ever threw a pass in the NFL.
I believe he did, but I
think
so because my dad is a Chargers fan. I think I remember watching a game with him in it. I may be wrong, but
he sure did.
Yeah.
He went 6 for 11 for 96 yards and a pick.
I didn't say it had to be a good NFL quarterback. I just said an NFL quarterback.
He threw 11 passes in the NFL for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, and even Stetson Bennett, I was surprised, but I knew he got drafted. I forgot he got drafted in the 4th round. Like, he wasn't even a 5th, 6th, 7th round. He was a 4th round guy. I was surprised by that.
Did Jake Coker play in the NFL?
I'm going to be straight up honest. I didn't even look into him because I didn't think he did. He may have been undrafted. I think I said drafted when I mentioned it to cover my base because I don't think he got drafted.
No, he did not.
Yeah.
Nor did he play in the NFL.
Yeah.
So that's so you said Cardell Jones did, Coker did not.
Stetson Bennett went higher than I thought, 4th round.
Okay, so everybody else is an NFL quarterback except for Jake Coker. Okay.
Yeah, and I even, like I said, the delineation between first round and drafted, if you look at like the 5 upper echelon teams, all of them had a first round quarterback. Deshaun Watson, Tua, Mac Jones, Joe Burrow, and I think J.J. McCarthy is going to be drafted in the first round, so that's 5. I appreciate that, Daryl. I know you're just kissing my butt because I said Kentucky's going to have a good year. But it's yeah, I want to go dive deeper into that too, because I do think there's a formula to where I think if you did enough research, you could predict. I mean, you can predict pretty well overall in college football the group of teams, but I think you narrow it down even more just based off quarterback, blue chip ratio, and all that other stuff. I'm going to add into, I don't know why I didn't, returning production, because that is a big stat. Like, if you look at most teams, there's the only outlier every year is Alabama because of Nick Saban, and he's no longer there. So maybe Kirby Smart moves into that where they can have the 120th returning production at some point and be in the top 4 or top 12 or whatever and compete for a national championship. But every other team last year was a top 25 team in returning production. Alabama was the outlier. They were 120 something, and that was because of Nick Saban.
So if the field does win against Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, who would the team be?
Mark, I really want to say Ole Miss, but the guy standing on the sidelines does not have any big game wins at Ole Miss. I can't do it. Like, if he was going to beat or win a big game last year, how do you not beat Alabama at their most vulnerable off a USF where Jalen Milroe has no confidence? By the way, did not play well in that game, and you couldn't beat him. You couldn't beat him, so it's hard for me to believe he can win a national championship. I don't care what the roster looks like, even though I think it's one of the 6 or 7 most talented rosters with the transfer portal. So that's all. I guess Oregon. Oregon
Yeah.
would be the 14 for me. I don't. Dan Lanning to me, I'm gonna get hate for this. I think he's just a better Mario Cristobal. That's what I think he is. I think he's a better recruiting Mario Cristobal because I don't think he's that good of a coach. I really don't. If you were a really good coach, you had to split versus Washington last year. You had just as much, if not more, talent than them, and you lost both those games. And in the championship game, let's be honest here, it wasn't close for the first 3 quarters of that game. You started to make it a game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're not on it with that evaluation. I hate to write guys off that
Oh, I'm
are
not writing him off
not even
because
40 years old.
he can 100% learn. I've seen Steve Sarkisian learn, and he talks about that, how he uses the offseason to learn. So if he doesn't, his issue, this is the biggest issue with people in general that become successful when they weren't originally, is ego. Like we saw this with Tom Herman. Tom Herman wasn't willing to learn from his mistakes, whereas Steve Sarkisian has 100% done that at Texas. If Dan Lanning can learn from some of the mistakes he has made, because he has made some, then he'll be a good coach because he has the recruiting part down. Like he's a very good recruiter. Anyone that knows the sport will tell you that. But I think that's what makes Mario Cristobal not a good coach too, is we've seen him do these stupid boneheaded things over and over and over again. So as long as you don't get caught up in that trap, I think Dan Lanning will be a good coach. And he's got so much money behind him at Oregon. I mean, that program has a very upper echelon limit if you can get him there. It's going to be very interesting, especially in the Big Ten. It's funny because I think the 2 best games next year are going to be between a team that's been in that conference for a long time and a new team coming in. And I think Georgia and Texas is going to be one of the best games in the year. And I think Ohio State and Oregon, I think that might end up being the best game in college football next year.